All right, looks like we are started. Hey everyone,
Great.
welcome to another episode of Musician Monday. Corey here with the Grand Rapids Symphony, and joining me is Principal Tuba Jacob Cameron. Jacob, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Corey.
Yes, it's so good to see you. It's good to see everybody. I'm getting to see all of my old friends again and the orchestra, and it's good to see that you're still hanging out, still have a big smile on your face. That's great news.
Doing my
So
best.
yeah, and I want to remind everyone, if you have questions for Jacob, feel free to put them in the chat here next to the video screen, and we'll definitely try to answer those questions for you as we can. So let's just start off with the boilerplate question I always ask everyone is, how long have you been part of the orchestra?
Well, officially, not even a full year yet. So the audition for the principal tuba position was last September, or was it October? It was in October, I think. And then so this coming October will be 1 year. But for years previous to that, my predecessor, Monty Birch, had retired, and the position was held open, and I was the main sub for years and years before I actually won the position. So I've been playing for a long time, but officially a member, not quite a year yet.
Yeah, definitely. You and I, because I remember a couple of years ago when we went to Carnegie Hall, that's how you and I kind of
Mhm.
became friends over the conversations about that experience and everything. And we'll talk a little bit more about the Carnegie experience, especially the cool thing you got to do
Yeah.
with that. But I want to talk about your instrument a little bit. So,
Mhm.
why did you choose the tuba?
I don't have any recollection of why I chose the tuba at all. You do a lot of dumb things when you're young, I guess. But I do remember very distinctly. My mom was my accompanist the first couple of times I went to solo and ensemble when I was in middle school, and I couldn't carry the tuba in its case because I wasn't tall enough to lift it up off the floor. So she carried my tuba, and then I carried a big giant pile of phone books that were taped together that I sat on so that I could reach the mouthpiece. And then I carried, and then she played piano too. So she worked so hard for those solo and ensemble experiences for me.
That's
Um,
amazing. That's amazing.
yeah, it was, and I love the sound of it. It's a totally unique sound. I often say that the tuba is one of the very few instruments that you can just play one note and people are like, wow, it's such a cool sound. And so I really love playing, and I like the role it plays as well in an ensemble. I mean, you get featured occasionally, but it's mostly a supportive role, and I feel pretty comfortable there. So.
Very cool. Yeah, some people I know when they get to tuba, usually they start off with like baritone, like
Mhm.
and kind of go from there and then end up in tuba somehow. So that's kind of cool that you were not even tall
Yep.
enough hit the mouthpiece yet and just ran with it. I love that. That's so great.
Yeah, it just goes to show you that you could be any size and play the tuba.
So do you have a favorite composer at all or anybody? I mean, that's probably a really broad question for a musician, but do you have any
Yeah,
composers you enjoy more so?
I tend to like Russian composers the most. So like Prokofiev and Shostakovich, and Rachmaninoff. I think in particular, I really appreciate their orchestrations.
Mhm.
Every time I listen to or play Shostakovich or Prokofiev, um, I'm always kind of taken aback by how fresh and creative their orchestration seems now, much less how incredibly unique and creative it was then. But you hear so much film music that's kind of patterned after, those types of composers, or Mahler or Bruckner. And but I think for me, the way they write melodies and their orchestration, it just really attracts me to their symphonic works. So
Most definitely, yeah. The brass gets a lot of love, especially
that's true.
with the Mahler and the Wagner, and then of course John Williams. Just no mercy there, you know.
Yeah,
So
right.
that's great, though. I love it. So some musicians before they get on stage, they have some sort of pre-performance ritual or tradition? Do you have anything like that that you like to do?
No, not usually. I live in Kalamazoo, as you may or may not know, and so I guess driving each time is kind of my pre-flight routine. It depends on the pressure of the particular performance. Usually, I'm good to go unless there's something really high pressure. Like I remember we did pictures at an exhibition a few years ago, and there's a very stressful tuba solo in that. It's really difficult because it's really high in the range and it's very exposed. And so that was more of a month-long preparation for that. But in terms of like right before a concert, to be perfectly honest with you, usually when I walk out on stage, I'm sitting there for a while before I do anything. So anything I do, before I get on stage gets erased in the first 15 minutes of me counting my rests.
There you go. Yeah, that's and some people do, some people don't. That's great though. And so speaking of driving
Mhm.
to from Kalamazoo, do you have I was how to say this looking beyond classical music or
Mhm.
chamber music, do you have like any certain types of music you really enjoy or flock to?
I don't listen to much music when I'm driving.
Okay.
I usually listen to like books or podcasts or something like that because I find it passes the time faster.
Mhm.
But I do love a lot of different types of pop music. Right now, because we have young kids, I'm kind of that's influencing what I'm listening to a lot. So lots of Frozen. But I enjoy personally more like progressive rock bands. So I'm a big fan of Tool, and I listen to a lot of like Led Zeppelin, also so some more classic rock stuff as well. Pink Floyd, I'm a big fan of Pink Floyd. And so I think a lot of brass players tend to go towards heavier music, especially low brass players, because it's kind of what we do in the orchestra. Um, so yeah, but I'd say that when I am listening to stuff, it's more along those lines. Sometimes I'll listen to bluegrass. I like Willie Nelson, so I do listen to some country, though not probably the more current kind of country pop stuff.
Mhm.
But yeah, so it's pretty varied, I'd say.
You mentioned podcasts.
Mhm.
What kind of podcasts do you listen to? Do you have any certain ones right now that you're just really into that you
Yeah, I definitely there's been a few that I've really enjoyed. So the ones that I kind of have on my playlist all the time are ones that are probably typical for a lot of people. So This American Life, Freakonomics, I like a lot, and Radio Lab. And then Radio Lab also made a podcast called More Perfect that's about the Supreme Court, which I really love that a lot. I found that to be really interesting. Apart from that, there's been some podcasts that have come up that are more um, like like a mini series almost. So there's one called Bundyville, which is about the Bundy family. I don't know if you remember that, where they had an armed protest not too long ago. I think it was in Nevada or Oregon. I can't remember which one it was. But I find stuff like that really interesting. And so so that kind of rounds it out. I mean, I listen to so many
Mhm.
because I'm in the car, an hour and a half a day during the year at least. And so I can rip through podcasts like you wouldn't believe. So I tend to forget them. Sometimes I'll listen to one and realize halfway through that I've already heard it.
That's funny too. I know for myself because for me driving to work, I'm in Hudsonville, so 15 minutes back and forth on good days, and my podcast list is getting bigger. I'm like, I haven't listened to anything really because usually I'm just so focused on work and I want to be able to
Yeah.
listen to podcasts, and so it's a very precarious slope right now. I'm 3 months, I'm 4 months behind everything now, and I'm trying to catch up.
Yep.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Um, so one question I always ask everyone, I know you love the tuba, you live and breathe the tuba, but if you could choose another instrument in the orchestra that you'd want to play, what do you think it would be?
That's a good question. I think that it's my first instinct would be like timpani or percussion or something that's pretty similar to what I already do. Um, I do love, I think I would probably just in terms of wanting to do something different, I'd probably go for either cello or violin or a string instrument where I'm playing the melody sometimes because melodies are nice. and I hardly ever get to play them. On brass, I guess if I switch to a different instrument, it'd probably be horn, because they get to do all of that stuff more. But it's a hard. I mean, I do really enjoy playing the tuba, and I think you get molded by the instrument that you play to some degree. You know, and so I like doing it partially because that's just what I happen to be good at. You know what I mean?
Have you ever tried to pick up a brass instrument like one like
Mhm.
with valves somewhere just to see if you could do it?
Yeah, we have a P trumpet. Do you know what that is? Those plastic trumpets.
Yeah.
I bought one of those for the kids to play with because they're pretty indestructible and they play very similar. And I can play that thing. You know, I wouldn't want to have to. You know, I wouldn't want anybody to buy a ticket to hear me play it. You know what I mean? But I can work it. And it's. I think that after you've gotten to a certain point on an instrument, at least my experience has been that it's easy for me to learn almost any instrument, just because I know how to practice, you know. So if we have a ukulele and a guitar and a piano, and I'm not adept at any of them, but I can figure it out pretty quickly. So, um,
My son just turned 3 last week, and we bought him a drum set for his birthday.
oh,
So,
geez, what were you thinking?
well, I'm a drummer too, so it's not a big deal for me. But it's just amazing to see, like, trying to teach him that process. And, but yeah, no,
Yeah.
yeah, some instruments you can easily, not easily, but you can translate between the few of them. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, so if you could choose another career, so obviously you're a musician, but you're also a professor as well at
That's
Western.
correct. Yeah.
But if you could choose another career outside of the music world, what do you think you'd want to try?
I don't know. I mean, I like problem solving a lot. Um, I like writing a lot. When I don't really like writing for work that much, but when I get a chance to write something that's more creative, I enjoy that a lot. I generally enjoy talking with people and trying to help them problem solve things. So I'm not sure what career all that would be pointing towards, but you know, I think that my mom does leadership consulting, and I find that work to be pretty interesting. What she does to help people kind of problem solve their own, you know, figure out their own leadership style and stuff like that. I think I'd like to do something along those lines where I'm helping someone figure out. I mean, in a way, that's not that different than being a professor. The way I, you know, being one on one with a music student, you're really trying to help them find themselves more than, you know what I mean? And I enjoy that process a great deal. So,
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. So I know, obviously, the quarantine and COVID-19 has changed our world in so many ways.
hmm.
And I guess I have a two-part question for you. The first one is, what are you personally doing to stay centered during the quarantine? But the second part is, being a professor, being somebody who's an academic and teaching people. How has
Hmm.
that also affected your livelihood? I mean, in terms of like how you approach the process and moving forward, like what the plans are for them to be able to still do that.
Yeah. So in terms of what I'm doing, you're probably experiencing this as well. You know, we have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old at home, and we've got a yard, and we're pretty self-contained, and so it's actually been mostly very fun just hanging out with them all the time. You know, my yard has not looked better ever in my life. You know, I actually pay a lot of attention to gardening right now, and so I think that, you know, we have a baby coming soon, as I told you earlier, and so we've been getting the house ready for that. And again, we're way more prepared for that than we were for the other two because we have all this time. And I'm used to having the summers off for the most part, anyways. You know, Symphony does a little bit of stuff in the summer, but we're usually just off. And so for me, it's mostly like a normal summer, just a little bit more reading and stuff like that, but mostly just hanging out with the family. In
Very good.
terms of how things are happening in the academic environment, we're, you know, music, teaching music at a university um, takes a lot of resources because, you know, rather than having 400 people in a class or even 30, you have one. And then also, in order to do anything productive in terms of ensembles, people have to be in the same room. So when we, in March, when we stopped going into campus, we had to make a lot of decisions about, you know, how we're going to do chamber music, which there was just no way to do it. You could, some people would assign listening assignments or things like that, and you can do that, but that's not really the class. The class is learning how to play together.
Mhm.
Um, in terms of lessons, I did them just like this. And sometimes that was very successful, and sometimes it really wasn't successful at all, depending on the internet connection they had, depending on if they had a microphone or not. A lot of times it was just on someone's phone.
Yeah.
And so I had a couple of students that it just didn't work for, and then I would have them send me just recordings, and I would evaluate the recordings and send them feedback, and then we would chat every once in a while. In terms of what's going to happen in the fall, Western's trying to grapple with that right now. We just went through a process where we're looking at every room and how much square footage there is in it and how many people could possibly be in there. How we're going to do masks and still play brass instruments. I have no clue how that's going to work. I've seen people with face shields, but I don't think that would work for us. Um, and so, they're talking about putting real high powered air purifiers in each office, which I think would help. But the reality is, obviously, I mean, it's important to plan, but if anybody thinks they actually know what's going to happen a month from now, I think we've all learned that lesson. Like who knows? And so I think Western's planning to be back face to face in the fall, but we'll have to wait and see. I'll believe that when I see it.
Well, most definitely, yeah. It's a whole new world, and I think the good news is that there's just a lot of creative innovation that's going to be happening. And even within the confines of quarantine, I've seen so many people talk about how they're creating art now, whether they're painting or writing or learning an instrument. I mean, it's really kind of cool to see how this is what everyone's leaning on for comfort and support through all this, and everything. And the orchestra's definitely helped out with that too, with the musician videos and the Hallelujah chorus and the Paganini and everything. So it's been really cool to see all that.
Yeah, there's no question that just being forced to grapple with it has raised everybody's level of expertise quite a bit. And so I'm totally comfortable teaching online lessons now. Before this happened, I had never done one before. And now I'm like, oh, okay, there's certain things that actually work just fine. And having the students record themselves is always good. I mean, nobody likes to listen to recordings of this themselves very much because you hear every little flaw, but it's really good for you. It's really healthy to do. And the technology is almost right. It's still a little bit buggy. I'm sure you've been dealing with that a lot. But it's pretty close. I mean, it's actually amazing how well it works. I just wish there was a way for us to actually be able to play synchronized together without a lag, but that's just not a possibility with current technology. Maybe once 5G gets going for real, maybe we could do something like that, but it doesn't work quite yet.
Oh, definitely. So I know that you have probably lots of great memories being on stage with GRS. I'm gonna hijack this for a second, just because I want to talk about the memory that the first time I ever really hung out with you was Carnegie Hall in 2018, and
Mm-hmm.
we had the chance to go to the Carl Fisher music offices.
Mm-hmm.
And I forget the name of the instrument, but it was a giant, massive tuba that was at least 100 years old.
Wasn't it Big Carl? Isn't
Big
that what they call it?
Carl was,
Yeah.
yes, Big Carl, but the thing was massive. And I mean, you're a tall guy, but this thing was probably like another half the size of you.
Yeah.
And they gave you a mouthpiece, and man, yeah, I'm sure it was hard for you because it's a big instrument, but you played it well. You played, I think Happy Birthday or something like that on there.
I don't remember
That
what it
was-
was, but yeah, it was incredibly weird to play. I mean, it was like you might as well have given me a trumpet. It was so different than my normal instrument, but it was fascinating to see it. And what they were so gracious and welcoming to us and gave us a nice tour. And they had that really cool balcony on the outside of the building with
like in Wall
amazing.
Street area too, and everything. It was so
Yeah,
cool. Yeah.
that was a really fun experience. I'm glad I don't have to play that instrument professionally, because I don't think I would be able to do it very much better than I did then, but it was a fun
Definitely.
experience.
Definitely. What are some other great memories you have of being with the GRS?
Well, I think that there's some musical memories in terms of pieces we've played. So we played Vaughan Williams' Fourth Symphony. Um, I guess that was 2 years ago, I think, and that's a big memory for me because that's one of the most intense tuba parts ever written in a symphonic work, and I just love the music. Of course, there's multiple experiences with Marcello, and just be Mahler 3 was a real magical experience with him, but he's such an incredibly inspiring conductor. All the experiences with him have been really amazing. um, yeah, so I think that the Mahler symphonies have been big highlights, and then the Shostakovich. We did Shostakovich 5, and that was really fun experience. So there's a lot. Sometimes when we get to do quintet work as the symphony quintet, I really enjoy that a great deal. And we've done some concerts at the American House, both in Grand Rapids and in Holland, and those are always real meaningful. It really means a lot to people when they hear us do that, and it's nice to feel that connected. Sometimes in a big concert hall, I mean, there's an audience there. Obviously, they're there, but the personal connection isn't quite as intense. But if you go into an environment, especially with people that you really enjoy performing with, and people are close enough that you can reach out and touch them and communicate with them, that's in some ways, I mean, it's different, but it can be a really meaningful and rewarding experience.
Almost definitely. And then my last question for you is something I ask everyone.
Mhm.
And you've kind of alluded to this a little bit, but do you have any hidden talents? Anything? Any special skills?
Well, let's see. I'm really good at finding morel mushrooms and Petoskey stones. So
That's a skill. That's a skill. So
they seem like they're connected somehow. I don't know what it is. Yeah, I mean that's about it. I don't have any other artistic skills. I definitely my 5-year-old is better at drawing than I am already, so that's definitely out. Yeah, I think that's probably it. Is I have a weird ability to find things. Like if someone loses a contact, I can always find it.
that's impressive right there. I love that. All right. Well, it looks like that's the end of the Q&A. Jacob, thanks so much for being here. Everyone,
Of
thank you
course.
for joining in, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you.